Welcome. How you doing? Let's chat. So today we are going to be covering exactly how I used willpower to lose 65 pounds and keep it off for about a decade and counting now. And the coolest thing about this approach that I'm going to share with you is that it actually gets easier and easier to implement over the course of time. These are also a lot of the methods that I use with my clients to get results. And if you're curious about said results, just check out the transformations page on my website at n1fitness.com. Okay, let's get to it. We're going to cover the ins and outs of willpower, why it's so misunderstood and misapplied, how to set yourself up for success, and this is going to be slightly different whether you live on your own, with your partner, and or if you have kiddos. And I'm also going to give you a few little tips and takeaways towards the back end of the episode. But first, we've got to kick things off with a super quick evolutionary biology breakdown because that's where it all started. And when it comes to evolution, rule number one is, you guessed it, do not die. Outside of a freak accident like getting into a fight with a bear or potentially infection, the number one threat for our ancestors was essentially starvation. And so animals, humans included, are wired to eat more and move less. Now, I'm sure that you've heard the statement, just eat less and move more and you'll lose fat. Well, shocker, without additional guidance, that advice doesn't work all that well because we are literally programmed to do the exact opposite. And this is something called optimal foraging strategy. An optimal foraging strategy is just a fancy way of saying eat more and move less. And I'll give you a super simple example. If you're sitting on the couch and you think, I feel like an apple, and you have four options. There are apples sitting on the table in front of you, 2 feet away. There are also apples in the fridge in your kitchen, which is about 20 steps away. Your third option is the fridge in your garage, that's 50 steps away. And your last option is the grocery store, which let's say is a 20-minute walk from your home. Which option are you going to go with? Of course, the apples sitting right in front of you on the table, right? Now, when you run out of apples on the table, then which option are you going to go for? The kitchen fridge, because it's now the easiest option. And only when you eat all of the apples in the kitchen fridge will you then go to your garage fridge. Once you're completely out of apples at home, then you'll go with the grocery store option because it requires the most effort and time by far. This just seems like common sense, but the actual reason that we do it this way is because rule number one is don't die. And so expending energy when it's not necessarily needed moves us closer and closer to the starvation end of the spectrum. We're wired to obtain the most amount of calories while simultaneously expending the least amount of energy in order to get them. This equation tells us that the best decision is first and foremost the apples on the table. The second best decision are the apples in the kitchen fridge. Third is the garage, and the worst option, evolutionarily speaking, is the grocery store. Now the kicker here is our external environment has changed because we have more than enough food access now, and it's easier to obtain than ever, meaning we solved our starvation problem. There are more folks dying from eating too much as opposed to too little nowadays. This is called an evolutionary mismatch because our internal programming, eat more and move less, served us incredibly well for the vast majority of our evolutionary history when food was far more difficult to obtain, i.e., before modern day grocery stores and food processing. But now it's the exact opposite. This wiring has become a problem, being that our external food environment has changed so much. This wiring, optimal foraging strategy, that had our ancestors survive is now literally killing us because we're now mismatched to our new food situation. Now you might be wondering, Marcus, what does this have to do with willpower? And the answer is everything. The research clearly shows that the folks with seemingly the most willpower use it the least. It's super counterintuitive, and that's why so many folks just constantly shoot themselves in the foot in regards to setting themselves up to get fat loss results. Unfit folks very often think that fit folks have tons of willpower that they just don't, and that is the difference maker between being in shape and not being in shape. And I've got great news. That ain't it. The truth is, the folks that appear to have the most quote-unquote willpower actually just set themselves up so they don't even have to use it. For example, let's substitute our apple situation for cookies. So we have cookies on the table 2 feet away, cookies in the kitchen, cookies in the garage, and then finally cookies, and plenty more things, at the grocery store. Fit folks understand and acknowledge that having cookies sprinkled throughout their home is not setting themselves up for success. And so they eliminate the first 3 options, meaning they don't keep cookies around. Now, if cookies aren't your thing, just substitute in whatever is. Maybe it's chocolate, ice cream, donuts, it doesn't matter. Point being, we want to put ourselves in a position where it's both inconvenient and effortful to engage in food behaviors that we don't want to engage in, and super convenient and effortless to engage in food behaviors that we do want to engage in. If you're sitting on the couch and a thought pops into your head because you saw a cookie commercial and you think, I want a cookie, but you have to go to the grocery store to get it, there is a very high likelihood that you just say to yourself, too much effort, I don't want a cookie that bad. Versus literally having cookies on hand that require virtually zero, if any, effort to access. Maybe they're sitting on the table 2 feet away. Optimal foraging strategy and our eat more, move less tendency says that we eat cookies just about every damn time in that scenario. This is the quote-unquote secret in regards to willpower. Take it out of the equation. This is what fit and healthy people do. They set themselves up for success and only rely on willpower when it's absolutely necessary. Even if you occasionally decide, you know what, I want a cookie bad enough that I'm going to go to the grocery store and get it right now, that's okay, because these moments are going to be few and far between. And so by simply making cookies hard to get your hands on, you get leaner and you get healthier with zero additional willpower required. So the biggest takeaway in regards to willpower, fat loss, how I set myself up for success, and how I recommend my clients do the same is via food environment. I love Coconut Bliss dairy-free ice cream. The peanut butter flavor is to die for. And I also know that if I keep it in my freezer, I'm gonna crush the whole tub. And I don't think for a second that that makes me a glutton, mentally weak, lacking in willpower, or anything of the sort, because it's just evolutionary biology. And I acknowledge that me as a single individual is not going to outwill or outpower millions of years of evolution. That would be wildly arrogant. One of the most common pitfalls that I see in regards to this is that folks often have a story in their heads that they quote unquote should be able to resist, say no, and simply skip all of these super calorie dense, hyper palatable foods sitting right in front of their faces on a daily basis. And if you fall into this category, I just have one question. What makes you so special? I'll be honest, I'm not that special. I know that my biology has a grip over me to a large degree, but the difference is that I work with the game, not against the game. Nor do I insist that the game have different rules. It is what it is. You can resist the urge to engage in sex all you want. It doesn't take away your sex drive. But if you're in a monogamous relationship, maybe don't hang out at the Playboy or Playgirl mansion 7 days per week and make it harder than it needs to be. This makes complete sense when we look at it in regards to monogamous relationships. But for some reason, we don't apply the same logic to food. And so we expect ourselves to hang out at the metaphorical mansion of food every day of the week, and then we wonder why it's so hard to lose fat and get healthier. Now, there is one super legit rebuttal to this whole food environment thing, and I alluded to it earlier, and it is families. Just because you choose to eat in a healthful way doesn't mean that your family has to. And so I have a few suggestions in regards to this. First of all, in my opinion, whoever does the grocery shopping chooses the food options. Simple as that. So if you happen to want to change your eating habits and or your family's, and you are the one doing the grocery shopping, pick up exactly what you want, and if a family member wants other things, they are more than welcome to go get them. Also, it's worth noting, unfortunately, if you've been buying all sorts of junk food and now your family members are essentially addicted to it, or perhaps even you're addicted to it, there is going to be a potentially uncomfortable transition period, which is essentially withdrawal. These foods are highly addictive. They're literally designed by food chemists with the perfect ratios of starch, sugar, salt, and fat in order to hit what's called the bliss point in regards to our taste buds, which then has us overeat them incredibly easily, not feel all that full, and gain tons of fat. Truth be told, these items are not actually food. A sweet potato is food, an Oreo isn't. Now, even if your family doesn't decide to take this on with you, I'd recommend organizing the kitchen, cupboards, and pantry in a way that sets you up for success. So maybe there's an area of the kitchen that they keep all of their junk foods in, and you decide that you just don't eat foods from that area. Also, if there are certain foods that you find especially tempting, you can always ask your family members to just not keep those specific foods around, and that others are fine because they really don't pull you. For example, if I lived with a partner and they ate differently than I did, I'd ask them not to keep Coconut Bliss, dairy-free peanut butter ice cream around, because if it's there, I'm eating the whole tub. But muffins don't tempt me in the slightest. I'm not a muffin guy. Things like croissants also, don't care. So you can have a combo with whomever you live with and find a setup that works for all of you. If losing fat and getting healthier is important to you, this is an important combo to have. And no, it's not over the top. It's not an unhealthy relationship with food. It's not obsessive. It's biology. It's acknowledging evolution and setting yourself up for success to get what you want in the easiest way possible, versus making something that's hard even harder. That just makes no sense. Another key factor in regards to taking willpower out of the equation is how you actually structure your diet and what foods you choose to eat and eliminate. From a 30,000-foot view, I'd recommend that you highly favor single ingredient whole foods, and then past that, individual calorie intake, protein, carbs, fat, and alcohol are going to vary between individuals based on a whole bunch of factors. And I personalize all of this stuff to each one of my clients. Hunger isn't sustainable, and so you should not feel hungry even when your goal is fat loss. And if you are, you're doing it wrong. Your portions are off, your macros are off, and or your food choices in one way, shape, or form aren't the right fit for you. I would love to give you more specific advice in regards to this, but it just depends on way too many factors, and this is where the individualization process truly comes in. Another tip, I'd recommend deleting all of the food ordering apps off of your phone to increase something called friction. If you have to download Uber Eats or skip the dishes every time that you want to use them, you'll use them less. And this is the equivalent of not keeping cookies in the house. Again, we want to make healthful eating easier. Stock your fridge, cupboard, and pantry with healthy single ingredient whole foods, and unhealthful eating harder. The willpower game is really that simple. Now, things like Instacart are an exception because that's grocery delivery, which can make healthful eating even easier. Now, when folks think of willpower, they also tend to think of discipline. And I put together a short podcast episode on discipline specifically, titled A Simple Step-by-Step Process to Be More Disciplined, and that is episode number 163. I'd recommend checking that out. So how did I use willpower to lose 65 pounds and keep it off? As minimally as possible. Also, it seems to be a finite resource. You can only resist basic evolutionary urges, food and sex, for so long. And so we want to quote unquote save our willpower for the situations that we don't have full control over, i.e. restaurants, friends' houses, events, etc. By setting ourselves up for success in the situations where we do have full control, i.e. at home. 2 clear and actionable takeaways that you can implement today. Number 1, get rid of all of the foods that you find highly tempting, and if you're in the family situation, modify accordingly. Number 2, stock your fridge, cupboard, and pantry with tons of single ingredient, healthful whole foods, because we want your home to be a quote unquote safe space. Make it as easy as possible to eat healthfully at home. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. On the other hand, if you choose not to implement any of these things and you think that you can just white knuckle it all the way to your fat loss goals, good luck. May the force be with you. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. On Instagram, I'm at N1Fitness. On TikTok, I'm at the N1Fitness. And on YouTube, I'm at Marcus Sadu. Feel free to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, if you'd like to, of course. And be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you found this episode useful, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.